Hello and welcome to another edition of the MiamiHal Real Estate Show. I am Hal Feldman. I am here as always with a great guest. I'm going to introduce him in a minute, but I do want to remind everybody this is an interactive program, whether you're watching live or on demand. Get in, keyboard a question or two. We'll look up every once in a while. We'll try to answer those live. And then even if you have a question afterwards, put it in there. We'll come back and to the on demand and see if we can get some answers out to you that way as well. So today we're going to continue the theme that I started last week with appraising. I am going to introduce a man who has been doing this for quite a long time. His name is Phil Spool. And Phil, I think the best way to introduce your history and your deep knowledge of appraising is to ask you, everybody that's an appraiser gets a license number, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And your license number in Florida is?
81.
Did you say 81? There's no digits before that?
Correct.
Okay.
There's no digits.
So how many years of appraising have you been doing?
48 years, and specifically in Miami-Dade County.
Okay. So I try to bring the best of the best, and there's no question I have that today in Phil Spool. So Phil, when we talk about appraising, most people don't understand that there are divisions and subdivisions within the field of appraising. So what do you specifically do, and what have you done in your history?
Okay, I like to start what I have done before, and that is there's a separation of different type of appraisals. And for the most part, I'm state certified general appraiser, which means I do and I'm allowed to appraise commercial properties besides residential properties. Within the last 14 years, I decided to basically concentrate on residential appraising. And even though I appraise throughout Miami-Dade itself in all different municipalities, I kind of like concentrate in the south end of town, like Pinecrest, Palmetto Bay, and I live in the Falls, so obviously I would appraise there as well.
What a surprise that we know each other, because those are my concentration areas as well.
Right.
And we've known each other for years, but you're not just a standard residential appraiser, are you? You've got some deeper history. So
right. Besides appraising for 48 years, I started off with a savings loan. Some of you who've been in Miami for a very long time probably remember Flagler Federal Savings and Loan. And I was with them for 20 years. In the last 8 years, I was the chief appraiser there. And then when we were taken over by First Union, I left and I joined up with a very prestigious appraisal firm of Walker and Rosen. We were based in South Miami. And I was appraising with them for 16 years. In the last 14 years, I've been on my own doing the residential appraisals. And my wife accompanies me. She's an appraiser as well. Besides, for that length of time, the type of appraising I've done, which is residential and commercial appraising, I also teach appraising and continue education with appraisers, or those who want to be appraisers, at Miami-Dade College, the Kendall campus there. I've written 28 articles on real estate appraisal theory in a national appraisal magazine, and I also am a special magistrate with the Value Adjustment Board hearing tax assessment appeals. And I know that you had Pedro Garcia last week, and he is the property appraiser, the chief property appraiser, and that's one component of the appeal process. Is they have the property appraiser represented, and then they also have either the property owner or they hire a tax agent to represent them, and they go ahead and they want to appeal their assessment, not taxes, but the assessment. But for the most part, I do residential appraising, and I love it. It is great.
And by the way, Pedro made sure that I would say to you, he says hello. You obviously know each other.
Absolutely. He started out, besides appraising, then he focused on being a magistrate. Yeah. I was a magistrate at the same time. And then when he decided to run, it was a clear, evident thing that he was very, very popular, and he won. And he has been reelected several times.
Several times now, yes.
Right.
So let's get into it. Why I have you here is because I think that as home buyers and home sellers are doing what they do, they may have some incorrect misperceptions as to what an appraisal is and how appraisers get to certain numbers. And you and I have had ongoing discussions for years about some of the things that may be these misperceptions. So right now we have a very hot seller's market. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so in order for somebody to win a contract, and it really is a competition at this point because a house goes on the market for sale and there are typically multiple offers. And so that's the competition. And the only way to win the competition is to raise your price that you're willing to pay and to potentially give away some of the contingencies beyond just what the price is, right?
Yes, absolutely.
There is an upward pressure for pricing in Miami-Dade County and across the country, actually. Would you also agree with that?
Absolutely. What we don't have right now here, for the most part, has been in other areas, like in New Jersey, the suburbs of the bedroom communities of New York, over in California, where you would have an asking price and then you have a bidding war. And it depends upon, if you really want to get that property, how much more do you over the contract, the asking price that you want to pay?
Yeah. So let's make some general numbers so that people have a sense of how they can follow along. A house is listed at, let's say, $515,000. And the value that the agent has told the seller is, I believe the house is worth $500,000. So they're listed at $515,000. The house is probably worth, based on what the agent has done in their analysis, about $500,000. And lo and behold, the first day, there's a bunch of people that show up and 3 of them put in offers and the competition begins, right? That's the boiling that happens, the frothiness of the market. And so let's assume that we have the 3 offers, they're all over asking. One is at $517, one is at $520, and one is at $545. They're just way over the top. And so the homeowner is sitting back and going, well, I got $545 offered for my house. I think I ought to take that. And you look at the rest of the offer, you find out if it's cash or financed, and whether or not the closing date is acceptable to you as a seller. And let's say all those other terms are acceptable. So the logical conclusion of those 3 offers to a seller is, we're going to take the highest one, right?
Usually it is.
Okay.
Sometimes they look at if the offer is from a cash buyer that is golden, without any contingencies in a contract. Contingency could say subject to an appraisal of no less than the contract price.
Okay, so you bring up an excellent point, and I thank you for doing it because I was about to. If any of those offers are cash, the cash offer means that there is no lender involved. A lender automatically means an appraisal process will occur. If you're a cash offer, you have a choice of either offering cash with no appraisal contingency or one with an appraisal contingency, correct?
Right.
Okay. So on this 545 offer, we're going to assume that it is a conventionally financed offer, meaning they're going to put 20% down. And therefore, with 80% being financed, there is an appraisal coming up. So the seller decides for whatever reason, they're going to take that 545 offer. They sign it. It's now a contract. And everybody gets excited because I'm going to sell and they're going to buy and everybody's happy, right?
Until the appraiser comes along.
Okay, good. So you've been in this situation probably tens of thousands of times at this point, right? 48 years?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So especially in a frothy market, what does that appraiser do as they are assigned that job, and how are they assigned that job? And let's go through that process.
Okay. First, I want to reply to a question you had made, and that is and I'm going to paraphrase it, it's a misconception about appraisers. Many people think that there are bank appraisers and non-bank appraisers, which is true. That bank appraisers are conservative and non-bank appraisers are not conservative. Not necessarily true. To reply to what does an appraiser do and what does an appraiser look at in terms of a house being sold that's under contract, we appraisers are bound to only use closed sales, not asking prices, not houses that are asking but are now considered pending sales because they're under contract. And for the most part, we want to even know what the contract price is because of the ethics involved with the realtor not to disclose what the contract price is. So we don't have privy of that. Now, when that house eventually closes, and if it's a higher amount, like the one that it's in a bidding war and they pay $545,000 for that, then that's a sale that we could use. So the appraiser has limitations on what we could do. In terms of appraising, most residential appraisers are what I call lender appraisals. They either are hired by the lender, which could be a bank, or they're a subsidiary of them called an appraisal management company, which does all the legwork and footwork of assigning an appraisal job to the appraiser, gets the appraisal, reviews it, and makes sure that's going to be compliant. Because most of the appraisals done these days are going to be for a lender through Fannie Mae, and they sell that on the market. So they are obligated to do evaluation based upon not only closed sales, but within parameters that lender wants. What I do is I don't do any more lender appraisals. I value the property. Again, I use closed sales. But I also look at the fact that if there are fewer sales of similar type properties to your property, then I would expand that neighborhood to go to a substitute but a very similar neighborhood. And I would also expand the time period of it if I have no other choice.
Got it.
Because we typically, by law, need to have a minimum of 3 comparable sales. And I don't use the word just sales. I use the word comparable sales because that's very important. Because if you have a house that's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house, you don't want to have that compared by the appraiser to a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house or a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house because that's a different type of a buyer and vice versa.
Sure. So they get under contract. The buyer works with their lender, and at some point after inspection, they say, okay, go ahead, I want to get the house appraised. Give me the very quick steps that a lender, in typically a bank, goes through to hire an appraiser, and then how many days and what's happening during that phase of the contract.
Okay. Because there are so many appraisers out there that do appraisals for lenders, the process basically is either the lender or the appraisal management company, the acronym is the AMC, puts out a notice to all the appraisers that are on their appraisal list. In other words, they have to be part of their list, and that's required by federal law. And they put a bid out to the appraiser, and appraisers will compete with each other for the assignment. It depends upon what the lender is, but typically there is a turnaround time. If they get awarded the assignment, they have to contact the person that they're going to meet them out to do the appraisal inspection, and they have around usually around a 48-day turnaround time. Sometimes if it's more of a complex appraisal, then it may be, instead of 2 days, it'd be 3 days.
Yeah, you said 48 days, you meant 48 hours.
I'm sorry, 48 hours,
yeah.
right, not 48 days, obviously.
So the other thing that's interesting to me is that when a contract is signed, the buyer wants that property to appraise for the value that they've put onto the contract. The seller wants that, and the lender wants that. So there's a lot of momentum already that we're going to have success and financial gains for all those parties if it does appraise for the value of the contract. And so what kind of pressure or what kind of process does the appraiser go through as they start their work of actually deciding what the value of the home should be?
The process, after they get the assignment, they find out more or less information on the subject property, whether it's been renovated, what has been renovated within the last 5. We also look at the age of the house. I know we've discussed this before. Certain houses that are older, and you could go into that more, perhaps have cast iron pipes. That's a big issue. One of the hot items that is in terms of renovating a house that we look at is impact glass windows and impact glass doors those were important issues that we have. But we would contact usually the property owner or the listing agent to find out information about it, to confirm the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, any renovations on the property. And then we would start our research that we'd have. We would look at the multiple listing service. We would look at the public records as well, gather the information prior to actually going out, and we will make an appointment with the person who's going to meet us there to go out to the property.
So once they're at the property, approximately on an average home, how long does it take to do the on-site appraisal work?
That's a good question you have, because I'm not slower, I'm just more detailed oriented. I've heard that some appraisers, including measuring a house, will take maybe half an hour overall together, which includes measuring the house, writing up the floor plan, writing up the description of the property, and leave within half an hour. I take an hour to an hour and a half. I think it's well worth devoting my time to that property to look at the details. And at that point, I would also ask questions and point out various informations. If I see a spot on the ceiling, I want to know whether that stain is on an existing roof leak or a prior one like that.
Sure.
And I would make my suggestions.
Most appraisers, at least by appearance to me, don't do the level of detail work that you just described. They're in and out of a home in 15 minutes.
Right, because they look at it as a job, not as a career.
Okay.
And I teach that in my appraisal class as well.
Okay, that's a big difference. You said some look at it as a career, some look at it as a job. Would you give a average percentage to each of those two categories? Is it 90% that look at it as a job and 10% as a career? Where do you think it really falls?
Well, if I would have to guess at it, 80 to 90% as a job and 10 to 20% as a career.
Okay.
Look, I've been doing this for 48 years. I could retire now if I wanted to, but I have the passion of it. And there are not many of the good appraisers that are still out there.
I applaud you for it too, because it truly is looked upon by most people now as just a job. And
Right.
You really have, I've seen it multiple times. There's a passion in what you do. And so the next thing I just want to ask is, so you go out to the home, you do all the on-site measurements and observations that you need, and then you go do your homework over that 48-hour period approximately that you were talking about, and you're comparing at least 3 properties to each other, comparable properties, right, to the subject.
Correct.
And how do you make your adjustments? Because this is where most of my buyer clients really get it wrong. So I'm going to give you an example, and then I want to hear more general things as well. The house that my client just got a contract on has a metal roof, and it was put on 10 years ago. And all the other houses in the immediate area that have sold recently have, let's call them shingle roofs, but they're all brand new. The buyer of the home loves the metal roof, and typically it's thought of as the creme de la creme of roofs, right? But it's 10 years old as opposed to new roofs of the comparable properties. How does that affect you, and how that might be different than what the buyer is thinking?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And how I get in tuned and knowing what other appraisers think about this, because you could get 3 appraisers to give the assignment, not knowing anything about whether it's a contract or not, and not knowing whoever thinks what the value is going to be on it. And you'll probably come up with 3 different values with that.
That can't be, Phil. You guys have all been properly trained and licensed.
Right.
How is that number different?
Okay. It starts off by, it's like having a child. In the first 5, maybe 10 years, the value judgment of that child of yours is going to be reflecting what your value judgment is. Once they start becoming a teenager, they want to be independent, and they're going to start developing their own value judgments in there. And eventually they're going to accept going back and accepting their own value judgments and the wisdom of their parents. In terms of appraising, when a person becomes a trainee appraiser, at what we will call like a newbie, they don't know what about the differences. How much do you apply a difference between a 1-car garage versus a 2-car garage, okay? Or 1 bathroom extra versus the other one. So they rely on their supervisor appraiser. and they rely on the judgment of that supervisory appraiser. Okay. Eventually, they go to another appraisal firm, or they decide to become on their own once they become certified, and they will probably carry on that decision of how much to apply for the difference between a one-car versus two-car garage, without expanding their horizons as to what really should it be. And what it really boils down to, what is the willing buyer pay extra for have that two-car garage versus a one-car garage? So in my class, the continuing education, which I teach at Miami-Dade, I ask the appraisers their opinion as to how much extra would you apply on that adjustment between a a one-car garage versus a two-car garage, an extra bathroom, and how much would they pay? And you'll be amazed of the differences. So the difference is, why do appraisers come up with different numbers, is because it all amounts to how much they apply for the living area difference between the subject house and the comparable sale, lot size, condition, age, all these different nuances that we look at.
Okay. So we're starting to get into the area of friction that I often see between buyers, sellers, and their agents. And I want you to kind of look at the audience through the main camera here and talk to us about the value of things beyond what you just said. So a buyer might be interested in a kitchen that is set up exactly the way that they want. And they're like, that kitchen to me is worth an extra $20,000. And that may not be how an appraiser sees that. Is that correct? And again, let's look at that audience, because I know you're out there.
Okay. First, I want to say one thing. The appraiser interprets the data that we have on comparable sales, and we make our opinions difference between the comparable sale to the subject property. We, throughout all the years of our experiences, we determine whether a buyer really cares that much difference, what type of roof it has, what type of flooring. It may have porcelain flooring, may have marble flooring, it may have real hardwood flooring, or could have wood laminate flooring. The different type of renovations. Some kitchens would have wood cabinets, or they would have a granite countertop or a quartz countertop. All these different nuances that would be there. So we, as appraisers, and you'd be very surprised as a property owner, for the most part, appraisers don't really care that much whether it's a quartz or whether it's a granite countertop. The type of roofing we don't really get into. Now, let's say that your house...
Ding, ding. Let me pause you there.
Okay.
Did you hear that? The appraiser in general does not care if you have granite or quartz. They don't care if it's a shingle roof or it's a metal roof. It's a bigger deal to you as a buyer or a seller than it is to the appraiser on those types of features of a home, correct?
Correct.
You, in fact, and I'm trying to lead you into this, when you mark down on your adjustments for a comparable house to the subject, you mark down a series of letters and numbers to show a difference in quality or age. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, this is something that's occurred within the last 15 years, and I don't want to get into too much technicalities, but Fannie Mae, which handles most of the loans that we have, instituted a code system based upon the condition and the quality of the construction. Not only that, they also institute a code system on a view of the property. And it's actually, the acronym for that is NBA, neutral, beneficial, or adverse. And in terms of the condition of the house, that's paramount, because you could have what they call a C3 versus a C4. And there are definitions between what a C3 is versus what a C4. If you ever get a hold of an appraisal that mentions C3 or C4, at the end of that appraisal report will be a list of the definitions as to, what type of renovations that were done, what type of quality of construction for that as well.
So those series of letters and numbers are a gradation of your perception of the quality of that home, correct?
Correct.
But there are far more gradients, I would uh, assume, of a buyer and seller looking at a house, and you really have to qualify it within approximately 5 different categories, 5 different ranges, right? As an appraiser, is that about right?
Yes, but I want to concentrate on one thing really. What does the appraiser considers the most important part or aspect of your house? And that is the air-conditioned living area, what we call the gross living area. Now, if you look at the property appraiser's records, their website, they have different numbers for square footages for different things. For example, total area. The one that you want to look at is what they call the living area. Then they have something that's secondarily important, and that's called the adjusted area. And you have to be very careful what square footages that you are looking at. The appraiser looks at the living area, which is the air conditioned area. Now, it may or may not be correct from the property appraiser's records, because if an addition was made, of course, the addition has to get a permit and get approved by the building and zoning department of that municipality. It is that building and zoning department's responsibility to notify the property appraiser. So sometimes you'll see a mistake in the property appraiser's records will list it as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, when in reality it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. So that's why appraisers don't rely on Zillow, and we do, as appraisers, don't recommend you rely on Zillow, and that the appraiser gets the information primarily through the multiple listing service that the real estate agent provides. And I also want to point out something else. We, as an appraiser, interpret what we consider the market, but I could afford to specialize in a certain area. However, Hal Feldman specializes in certain areas, and they will know actually more about the nuances of that area or neighborhood more than the appraiser does. And that's an important thing that we as appraisers, when we verify a sale through the listing agent, they know more about that property because we don't have the ability to gain access to the interior of that house to really know about it.
So you, as an appraiser, if you're in an area that you're not familiar with, you would rely on agents and that additional information that you can get from a phone call or an email with that agent, correct?
Not only that, I rely on even in the area I would specialize in. I tend to specialize in Pinecrest, Palmetto Bay, and of course where I live in the Falls. Okay. And I would still call the real estate agent, and that's how we got to know each other as well.
It is. But that is not how most appraisers are approaching this these days, at least again, my perception. How about for you?
Well, how can they if they have to have a turnaround time in 2 days?
Okay.
I require a week turnaround time, and I limit my amount of appraisals that I do as well.
So what we're hearing is that obviously there's licensing, there's continual training that needs to be done for appraisers, but there's all different types of appraisers, meaning they could be young and inexperienced, they could be senior, and there's influence and personalization that goes on with that. What happens to a buyer or a seller that gets an appraisal done and it doesn't meet the contract price and they truly believe that an appraiser missed something or miscalculated the worthiness of a feature of the house? What's the approach that somebody can take?
Okay, if this involves a lender, then they have to contact the lender and tell them that we disagree with the appraisal, but it has to be on factual information, not a matter of opinion. For example, the condition of your house versus the condition of the comparable sale. That is a matter of the opinion of the appraiser. However, if they miscalculate the size of the house, or if they say it's a 1-car garage instead, it's actually a 2-car garage. So those are the things that we look at.
Wow. Okay. We're getting close to the end. I hope that you guys have learned a ton about the appraisal process and the quality of, in particular, Phil and what he's done over his 48-year and continuing career here in Miami-Dade County and actually all over Florida. Is there something that I missed that you just want to make sure that the average Florida homeowner or soon-to-be homeowner needs to know about how to work through the appraisal process?
Yes, I would say so. Appraisers sometimes get a bad rap on considering, because they may disappoint someone in terms of the value that they come up with. But you have to consider in a rising market there is something that we cannot control, and that is if values are going up, we have to use the information that we have, which is historical information, properties that have closed. We're supposed to also look at the increasing in value, and values are like a range, and legitimately you come up with the upper end. But we also have to protect ourselves because the lenders, if the property ends up getting to foreclosure, what are the first things they're going to do? They're going to sue the appraiser. So we're kind of like concerned about that as well.
I bet.
So take into consideration that an appraiser has to have their guidelines they have to meet. And I've been finding out personally as myself as an appraiser that houses are selling for more than what I appraise it for. And I take a very good detailed information and thought process in valuing the property, and yet it sells for more.
Amazing. Well, Phil, thanks so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And for you joining us. Every week, I bring in a new person that is just going to give you a different perspective on the real estate market. It's all about real estate dreams and trying to make those come true. I am Hal Feldman. I am the smart move for you as a real estate agent. Phil's a smart guy to know, and I really appreciate our friendship. We've been friends for many, many years, and thank you for your insights today.
My pleasure.
Until next time, have a great